Well, welcome to Convergence, the podcast of the Boulder Spirit Foundation, and our initial episode, which I'm very excited about, and not the least of which because of the guest I have with me in the studio today. Ashley Murphy is with us. Ashley, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good. So Ashley is the director of the Wesley House at CU Boulder here in the great state of Colorado. And Ashley, how long have you been there?
4 school years, which is like 3.5 calendar years.
Okay. So, and you are coming from where?
Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay.
This is my first college gig, though. I'm coming from regular old parish ministry, which is never regular, but was a totally different world, and started college ministry mid-COVID, which was special. So.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I was just doing the math. I wasn't doing math in my head. Yeah, I guess that would be about when that was.
Yeah, August of 21. So when I got here, we were not allowed to let students come into the building.
Oh.
And we were not allowed to serve them food outside the building.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So this is obviously the Boulder Spirit Foundation itself. We work with youth and young adults, and what part? So obviously the reason why you are here, and I'm just curious right from the beginning, like what if you were kind of in normal, everyday parish ministry, which multi-generational, all kinds of folks. What attracted you to working in the young adult field and college ministry in general?
Sometimes we make really fantastic plans for how life is going to go. And then sometimes God goes, that's funny.
Yeah.
No, not that. And it was definitely one of those moments. So I had been serving the local church for 13 years. I was in theory had arrived, right? I was at the largest church in our annual conference.
Wow.
Had a thriving congregation. We had 400 in worship. We had a huge kids program, a huge youth program by New England standards. I grew up in Central Florida. We had a non-existent church by Central Florida standards, but by New England standards, we were huge.
It's so funny how the standards are different.
Right.
And then you come out west and you're like, oh my gosh.
Right. And then I was like, oh, we really were huge. But I was so burnt out from COVID. COVID was so hard.
Yeah.
And I wasn't looking for a new job, but every single night I would lay down and be like, God, you've got to be kidding me. This cannot be how this is supposed to go.
Right.
And God would go, just get up and do it again. I'm like, for real? Okay, we'll get up and do it again. But somehow we went from working 60-hour a weeks before COVID to working constantly.
Right. There was no break.
There was no break. And I wanted to be my best for my congregation. And there are days I knew I was the tiniest fraction of even passable because I was like, I'm so tired.
Yeah.
I'm just so tired. And so it was a random June afternoon. It was right after lunchtime. I get this email from the coordinator of jobs at the university, Boston University's School of Theology.
Okay.
So she was like where you would go if you were looking for a job and you were struggling to find one.
Okay.
As an alum. And she said, hey, this came across my desk. And I had talked to her a couple times because we were friends about how exhausted I was. She's like, you should throw your name in the hat. And I wrote back to her and I was like, for what? None of this is what I know how to do. None of this is. Also, did you notice it was in Colorado? She's like, yeah, but what could it hurt? And I was like, okay, fine. When's it due? She goes, 5:00.
Like that day?
Yes, that day.
Oh, man.
So I am not kidding you. I put together the saddest cover letter you have ever seen in your entire.
2020. This is pre-Chat GPT. You can't even.
There's
throw it
no
in there.
Chat GPT. There's nothing, right? Like the best you could do was a Canva fancy border.
Hey,
right?
We'll take it.
So I put together a crappy cover letter and I sent it off, and I heard nothing. And it gets to be the end of July, and I'm cleaning up my inbox to start another COVID year of church. And I just sent up a quick email to actually a member of our board that's still on our board. And it's just like, hey, I'm just cleaning up my inbox. Thanks so much for your time. I'm going to delete this. And within seconds, I get a phone call. No. We've just been really busy this summer, and we haven't gotten around to it. Actually, can you do a phone interview tomorrow?
Oh.
That was a Thursday. My husband and I flew to Colorado for an in-person interview on Sunday night. I got my offer letter on Wednesday, and we moved 2 Mondays after that.
Wow.
It was a total God moment. It was one of those, this doesn't make any sense how it happened. And I got here knowing absolutely nothing about how to make it work. And it just did.
I think there's a lot of other youth and young adult workers who have a similar story. Maybe not quite as dramatic of like moving across the country. That's an extra little piece of the puzzle there that's not small. But I think a lot of people just find themselves into it. Like maybe their parents and, their youth are involved, or, they're just, interested. I think about all the volunteer youth directors I had growing up in our little church in eastern Montana. And I realized looking back, like how much I took for granted that they were there. These parents who were, community members who were willing to do it. But I'm like, I can't imagine what finagling had to happen to get them to agree to hang out with a bunch of snotty teenagers on Sunday nights or whatever. And they did great stuff, and it's, but I think it's a calling. I mean, I do think that's the fact that, you feel some movement of the Holy Spirit in there, I suppose, makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And what's funny is if you ask me now, the last time I met with our district superintendent, she was like, so would you ever go back to, and I was like, no, I don't, like, I can't ever imagine not doing this.
Right.
Like the way it pushes me and forces me to grow spiritually, while being the pastor is incredible.
Yeah.
I can't imagine going back. So.
Yeah. You're feral.
Indeed.
Yeah. I have friends. I still have friends and people in my church who work corporate jobs, and I came out of corporate, and they're like, well, do you miss whatever? And I'm like, oh man, I don't think I could. It'd be really hard to go back to having somebody standing over me telling me what to do. I'm like, I'm not very good at that.
I'm not even going to lie. Like, I put on real pants and not sweatpants today. That was a pretty big stretch.
I know. It was a big favor you're doing me right now. I appreciate it. So. All right. So part of the point of this whole thing is to help support and encourage fellow people in your shoes who, again, are doing this really, really important and probably occasionally thankless feeling work. Thankfully, hopefully we all understand that, our youth and young adults are people we need to invest in. We don't have, they're not only, it's cliche to say they're the future of the church, because really, honestly, many times they're the presence of the church.
Absolutely.
I mean, our youth ministry here brings so much life and vitality to this church, and we rely on them probably more than we should for some things, but they are already life-giving people. So, but I asked you before you came, it's like, if I just to start us off, some kind of relatable, funny, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is part of my job sort of moments. I've yet to meet somebody who has spent any amount of time working in this area that doesn't have like some kind of like, I can't believe this thing just happened and I'm have to deal with it, kind of thing. So you and I know each other well enough to know that I think I've heard a few good stories from you. So I don't know which one you're going to pick, but I just want to throw that out there to start us off. Like, give us that like, oh yeah, I can relate moment for all of our people at home.
Yeah, there's so many great stories about campus ministry, but one of the important key factors is that not only do I work at the University of Colorado Boulder, but I live right next to the church. And so very often there is this gray line between where the church ends and my home starts. And the gray line is typically like at my front door.
Right. Right, because it's probably not lost on your students, the people you're working with, that, oh, by the way,
she's right there.
She's right there.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not lost on them at all. They love it. And while it's awesome to live right there, sometimes it's challenging. But one of my absolute favorite, continues to be one of my favorite moments, that the student has been graduated now for 2 years. But my doorbell rings. It's the middle of the afternoon on a Monday, which is typically my Sabbath day. So I'm home. And I look outside and I'm like, that's Lily. So I go down. I open the door and Lily goes, Pastor Ashley. And I was like, oh no, nothing that comes next is good. She goes, you're not going to believe it. And I was like, oh, it's worse than I thought.
It's like, no, I'm probably not.
I'm going to go with you're right. And she goes, I've been building a temple in my mind. And I was like, oh, that's fantastic. She goes, no, I took 4 hits of acid and I'm building a temple. And I was like, oh, okay. Tell me more. She's like, no, like with bricks. I was like, cool.
Okay.
Come inside. We're going to go inside. So we come inside. Typically, I would take her to the church. I was like, we're not even going to try to walk. We're just going to come inside.
There you go.
Sit down on the couch. Let's get a snack and some water. And in my head, I'm now preparing for the worst, for someone that maybe needs medical attention. Or
Sure.
But no, she just needs to talk. And she spends the next several hours sharing about this temple and about, what the time she's going to spend in the temple and what she's going to learn in the temple. And then we start kind of unraveling her faith and how she doesn't want the temple to have a sanctuary, even though it's a temple, because she's not so sure that God's real, but maybe God's real. And it becomes this really fabulous many-hour conversation, followed immediately by her passing out hard on my couch.
Okay.
And when she woke up, I was like, we're just going to wait until you're better. She woke up and she's like, I don't know how much of what I remember is what I remember and how much of it I fabricated in my sleep. And I was like, I don't know either.
We may never know.
It's a mystery to me too. She's like, but I think God might be real.
Oh.
And I was like, I think so too.
Yeah.
Good talk. And it was this great moment. And she had been coming to Wesley during the day when we were not having worship services. The whole time I'd been there.
Okay.
And had apparently come pre-pandemic.
Okay.
And she was like, do you think I could come for church? I was like, yeah, I think you could come for church.
Anytime.
Right? Absolutely. And so
man.
until she graduated, she came for church. And it's so funny because anytime I'm home on a Monday and my doorbell rings, I'm like, wonder what's going to happen.
Right. You probably had other plans for your afternoon.
Right? It was, my kids got off the school bus. I was like, go play in the yard.
Right. It's such a beautiful day outside.
Right?
Don't come in here.
Don't come in here.
Oh man, that's a good story. That's a good story. Yeah. Next time I'm having one of those days, I'm like, well, it's not 4 tabs of acid bad.
Right.
So, but even still, like that, I mean, how interesting that you were the person that she's like, I gotta talk to somebody.
That's right. And that's part of what while there are challenges to living where you work, one of the things I love the most is how organic my interactions get to happen, right? It's not, the building was open, but I wasn't at my office.
Right.
But she knew where to find me, and I think it's awesome.
No, I think it's great. It's not only physical, though. I mean, it's not just you were physically available. It's like clearly, she had been around enough to know, Ashley's a safe person.
Right.
I'm in this place that, I've having never done acid myself. I mean, it was I guess I'm just a boring guy.
I had not either.
I don't know exactly where that leaves you, but I mean, definitely, she sought you out because, she thought, okay, like this is a safe person.
Right.
That I could do that. And I think that's one of the things we aim for. I mean, that's one of the things we want for our kids. I'm sure, man, I feel like there's plenty of places, I'm inundated with places that I don't really feel safe. I mean, maybe not like physically unsafe, but like, can I be myself? Can I express vulnerability? Can I be not okay in this group of people? Even if she hadn't been there for worship, clearly she's like, okay, this is a place that I can be, not okay and expect a reasonable amount of hospitality,
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a great story. I think it's great. I think it's a good what we do, right? I mean, what we aim for, I know for us and for me, like that's a big deal. Like for me, my biggest thing about youth group, like growing up, what kept me coming back was it was a place that I could be myself, and I was a big fan of camping ministry in the summertime. And the big thing was I was this, large, awkward kid, who didn't really fit, anywhere else in a school dominated by, athletes and everything and all these people I was not. So church camp was that safe place where I can be goofy and I can be funny and I can be sad or I can be whatever I want to be or whatever I feel like, and that was rare. So there you go. So some pretty good confirmation for you, if nothing else.
It was.
Yeah. When push came to shove, she's like, all right.
So we're going to go. And she's not alone. I get all kinds of, that was my favorite moment.
Yeah.
But I get all kinds of people that we don't necessarily have a relationship, or I don't think we do, right? Maybe they spend time in our building or whatever. And then when something's tough, they'll come. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, so that's why we're here. Yeah.
Before the mics got turned on, we were talking about COVID and our experiences during COVID. And as you were talking, it was a very different circumstance, but we finally, our first kind of in-person thing was that Easter 2021. We had an outdoor service here. Cuckoo spread everybody out and is outside. And there was a young woman who I didn't recognize, came up and handed me a note. And it turns out it was a child of some of my people who were always there, but she never came. But while mom and dad were watching church on TV on Sunday morning, she would sit with them. and watch. And so she had been watching church and watching me for a year. And so she gave me this note, and it was amazing. I still have it. And it was just, she felt very affirmed and everything and everything. And it was just this wonderful, touching moment. And, and we I don't think we'd ever actually met in person. Right. But she was just like, I didn't know, church could feel like, I didn't know church could be this kind of safe feeling. It's not exactly what she said, but that's how it felt. So,
yeah,
those moments are great.
That's so good.
So many people have so many barriers,
right?
That you don't even know about. So, yeah. All right. So part of our goal here is also to kind of share ideas and resources. And I'm a big, I was an engineer before I was a pastor. So I'm a big, learn by doing or learning by others who've done. So the other thing I asked you to kind of think about is there a ministry or an activity or something you've done at the Wesley House that you feel, one, has been reasonably successful, and then two, might work other places? Some things don't work other places. Some things are of a place, right? There's something unique about the place or the space or the resources or whatever that's like, yeah, that's great for this. But I do think things do transfer, right? Because at the end of the day, young people, face similar challenges and opportunities wherever you are. So, so you have something that you kind of feel fits that mold, that you're like, we do this thing. And I think other places, I don't understand why other people don't do this.
And we fell into it. I'm going to be totally honest. We totally fell into.
Well, that's the best kind.
Right. So I did local church ministry for a long time. I was one of those people that planned my entire year of worship out, and I would give it to my music director, and it was so good.
We're supposed to do that, right?
We are taught to do that. You're supposed to do that. If it's not done, I would take a planning week and go away by myself every year in July and just come and crank it out. And I did that my first 2 years at Wesley. It doesn't work as well when your congregation changes every 6 months to plan out a year. Right? So I would plan this thing that worked really great for those people last year, and then I get all different people. I'm like, oh, that didn't land the way I was hoping it was going to land.
Right. These people are not as interested.
Right? They don't like it at all. And so about 18 months ago, 3 semesters, my whole world is semesters, 3 semesters ago, we were getting ready to go home for Christmas, and I was like, all right, well, what are we going to do when we come back? And I looked around the room, and I realized that I had students from all different parts of the country, from all different theological backgrounds, and all different places, faith-wise, right? I have some students that have wholly devout, like the church is life to them. I have some students who are like, I really just come for dinner.
Right. I heard there's free food.
There's free food. And I think all of those are completely valid reasons to be at the table. So how are we going to talk to each of them? And so I just threw out a couple of scripture stories. And I was, can you guys just tell me, what's the story of Jonah about? And I get as many different answers as I have students. Interesting. Daniel in the lion's den. We went through 5 or 6. And I was like, so there is no collective answer to this. We're going to go back and we are going to go, what if we do Sunday school, literally Sunday school. We'll call it Wednesday school because we do church on Wednesdays. And revisit those stories that some of these people have never heard.
Right.
Most of them heard at between 5 and 10 years old. And the way we
they heard the Sunday school version of them.
Sunday school version. And the way we teach Sunday school, and it's not bad, it's what you need to do with a 5 to 10-year-old. Right. It's like you read them a kind of mellowed out version of the story, and you distill a particular message, and then you just tell them that the story is about X. Not bad. That's what you got to do when you're little. That's what I do with my littler kid. But they had never read the whole story and certainly never considered what it might mean applied to the real world that they're living in. So we started doing Wednesday school, and I was like, I have come to the conclusion that sometimes all of us still like Play-Doh, still like finger paint, still like running around after a kickball. Even when we think we are too old. And so we would do read the scripture and then do a very Sunday school-esque project.
Okay.
Sometimes an arts and craft project, sometimes a game, sometimes really silly. And the goal was to be really silly. And then we would sit down and have a genuine adult conversation about what does this mean? And often, whatever the silly thing was enough to take the awkward out. right? So when you're going to have a hard conversation about whatever, right? So we need to have a hard conversation about how when we don't do what God is calling us to do, sometimes that starts to get things are hard, right? The Jonah story isn't about a fish as much as we teach our little kids that it's about, sure, there's the fish, but
it's cute. Makes a cute like picture on the like on a nursery wall or something.
So cute.
Yeah, same with like Noah's Ark. I love it when we put Noah's Ark in nursery walls. I'm like, we're just pretending like what's going to happen next. We just ignore everything that happens next. Like, oh, by the way, there's a giant flood and everybody drowns.
I think it's the after, because there's always a sun, right? It looks so happy. Like there's the sun and Noah, and they are going on, but
yeah, it would be better if they were coming off.
We made it.
Yeah, it's the going on that's the problem. Okay. All right.
And I remember teaching that in Sunday school one year, and the kids going, wouldn't the animals eat each other? I was like, we're just gonna keep going. Yeah. Just keep going.
That's why there's no more unicorns. Sorry, honey.
Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
But so, sometimes we want to have hard conversations about some of the things that Scripture calls us to that we don't love.
Yeah.
Or that calls us out. We really don't love when Scripture calls us out, which it does a lot. And often why we gloss over it for littler kids is like, we're just going to make it it's all going to come down to God loves you, which is great. Right. But there's a little more to it. So we get the awkward out with the activity and let that be the awkward moment or the cathartic moment. For a lot of people, it's the cathartic moment. And then be able to really have the solid conversations where people are going to disagree. No, I don't think that's what it says. Well, I don't.
So the structure would be you encountered the story in some way, reading it, probably, from
usually a couple of different translations, depending on if it's long or short. Sometimes, I'll be honest, we always made a children's Bible available, despite the fact that there are no children.
Right.
But sometimes having it in really plain English is helpful, right? And then some standard translations.
Technical.
With all the words. So we would read it 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
And then whatever Sunday school activity, arts and crafts, whatever.
Okay. So for like, what, do you remember what, like, so if it was Jonah, like what some of the activities that might go, are you like making fishing rods or?
So Jonah was really fun. We did Jonah. I have a very engineer heavy student base. I think it's our geographic location is just near the engineering building on campus. So of course, as soon as I said we were going to do Jonah, there were a lot of questions of like, but how is it possible to be inside a fish for 3 days? Wouldn't you just be consumed by stomach acid? So I said, I don't know, let's find
suffocate.
Out. I was like, I feel like there'd be so many other problems before you burned to death. But whatever. So we took raw shrimp and we figured out the pH of the inside of various fish and averaged them together and used vinegar and water and pH paper to make stomach acid. And we dumped the raw shrimp in there, which promptly cooked. Oh, yeah. And then we talked about how maybe it's okay that this story isn't about a fish.
A literal fish.
And it created this fabulous conversation about what happens if we let go of the literalism of Scripture. Does it take it away?
Right.
Or is it actually freeing us to see what the story might be teaching us?
Right. Oh, so that works on all kinds of levels then. Yeah. Because that is a big place you eventually have to get to. And and I think there's a certain decision you have to make is, does it, and it's probably individual. Like, how much do I care?
Right.
As somebody who, again, I was an engineer, I studied physics. I mean, it's just like, how much do I care about what we would call now the factual accuracy of every aspect of this story versus what is it trying to teach me? Like, does it really matter?
Right.
I mean,
and my students will tell you that I am the first to say, like, factual accuracy is pretty low on my list of things that matter versus moral lesson. And one of the big growth moments for me as their pastor, as the pastor to young adults who are in this period of life where everything that can be questioned is questioned, and some things that you don't even think can be questioned is questioned, and which is fabulous, is to just leave space for that. To sit there and be like, you are perfectly welcome to prove me wrong. You do not have to agree with anything I say. I am going to be the last person to talk in this room.
Right.
At all times. which is so different than I'm going to get up and give a sermon.
Right.
And so important for them.
So when you get to the conversation time, you're really letting them drive the conversation.
So I'll usually have a couple of leading questions if the conversation doesn't start on its own. And as the school year goes on, I need them less and less.
Yeah.
As people get comfortable with one another, but they're always there. I print them out and I put them on the table.
Yeah.
So that if somebody needs them, they can pick them up and use them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just like defaults, right? You just need some default, starting places, if nothing. I mean, if the, spirit moves and people start taking off, then great, follow where they're going.
Exactly.
But yeah, I get you. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I like that idea. And I do think that we, we can sometimes feel like, I learned that from people themselves can feel like, I learned that in Sunday school. I already know everything about it. Or, even as pastors, we're like, do I go back to that whole thing? I mean, haven't we heard the story a million times? And I'm like,
right.
Well, but there's probably something to it, for some of these things. And I have noticed even amongst adults, some of the best received like worship series and stuff we have been, the Jonah story and Ruth and, these kind of, famous stories that, people kind of have that, 5-6-year-old understanding of and have never had the opportunity to go back and think about it again, because when does that come up in your daily life?
Right.
Right.
And if you're able to write scripture off that it's not coming up in your daily life, how much time have you given it to consider? Because it probably actually is.
Right. So was there something that helped you do you find that the people you work with are just naturally interested, or when you tell them about, so you're going to have a whole new crop this fall, people. So when you're pitching them on, hey, we do this thing on Wednesdays, what's that pitch look like? So that gets them excited about if they've not come before. This is one of those things that feels like if you've been, you're like, okay, that was super fun, I want to come back. But what's the pitch look like to get them there in the first place?
Yeah. And we will come up on that pitch very soon where we'll have to go stand and people will come around and sign up for different clubs. And I have an unfair advantage, although anyone can do it. It's called food.
Yeah.
But if you feed them, they will come is still very true. And it's particularly true in the young adult set. One, because of food, but two, food with someone else to eat it next to.
Yeah.
One of the things that is true for not just college kids, but folks that are kind of branching out into life on their own in general.
Yeah.
It's it's lonely.
Yeah. Starting
a new life. We've always had parents or siblings or whatever, and now you're out there. Right. And so the idea of fellowship brings people in first.
Right.
One of the other things that we try to do is operate as a third space. I remember when my parents bought the parsonage off the church we went to when I was a kid.
Oh.
And so we grew up next to the church. My parents were, neither one of them was pastors, but we lived right next to the church. And so we would go over to church for all kinds of things all the time, all kinds of things. And the church was unlocked. And so sometimes it was to go kick a kickball around in the fellowship hall because it was raining outside, or, ride bicycles up and down the walkways of the campus or whatever. And it was as much our home as anywhere else. It was this extension of home. And that was so fundamental for me in ultimately deciding to do what I do. So we operate as a third space where the goal is for people to have that comfort, to feel safe, to know that it's a home. And so as much as, yes, if somebody comes and asks me or at a booth or whatever, we'll give them the pitch. The organic, hey, if you just need a place to hang out, or we have free snacks and coffee.
Right.
Pitch is a lot better than come and let me tell you about my understanding of Jesus.
Right.
And then you can sit and have those conversations, right? When you start to build a relationship. But we do a lot of relationship building first. A lot of my early semester stuff will be, I sit on campus. It's the only time you will find me wear a collar, is to be on campus. And it's, let me buy you coffee.
Right.
And that's it. You don't have to talk to me. I'll buy you coffee. Mm-hmm. And we buy a lot of coffee.
I bet.
And a lot of people will ask me questions like, what's with the funny shirt?
Right.
Which is a great segue. Which then it's, I'm a pastor. Mm-hmm. tell me more about you. Building relationships is the very best way. And it doesn't have to be around anything. We do a few events. We closed our semester with a trip to Dave & Buster's.
Yeah.
And it was bring your friends, but also I put a big sign up outside that says you can come for free.
Right.
And so they did.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, they're like, so you don't care what I believe? And I was like, no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not that we don't care.
I do care.
Right.
There's no prerequisite belief.
Right.
And I would love to talk to you about what you believe. Yeah. Right. And so they're like, well, and students will say, I was raised in a different denomination, or, okay,
great.
Cool. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what and so creating spaces just to build a relationship is really where
I believe it. I like that. And I think there are so many places and so many times when you'd be tempted to say, okay, yes, especially with youth and young adults, if you feed them, they will come. What's interesting lesson we've had around here is that, at least in our youth group, our kids get more excited for food when they know like it's homemade. Versus you would think like, oh, just give them pizza. And I'm like, they get so much pizza. Like they don't, but so when I've done it, when I've made food for them, like I made like sloppy joes and, from scratch and everything. And I brought nothing home. Like it was all gone. And they're like, oh yeah, they love it when they know it's homemade. And it's just, I don't think people cook as much anymore either,
right.
Just in their natural lives. Kids are busy, parents are busy, so just things like that. But it would be easy just to, to rest on your laurels and say, oh, we brought them in and we fed them and they came and we had some good conversations and chat a little bit. But it takes that level of intentionality to go that extra space to say, okay, but we're still the church, right? We still have a job to do. So it's not never a bait and switch or anything like that, but just to say, okay, now there's an additional invitation. Right. And I've been there on Wednesdays, so I know you don't have to stick around. I brought my son and we did not stick around. He's like, I ate the dinner. Like, Dad, I'm out. And I'm like, okay. Like we were tired. We had to go home. But to just go ahead and make that additional invitation to say, hey, we also do this thing over here.
Yeah.
And that's still going to be done in a fun way, an interesting way. And, and today's lesson involves Play-Doh or, pH balancing a fish. That's pretty neat. That's a good enticing way to do it. But to not stop at just, the whole like, well, we got them in the room and, we fed them and we, had some nice conversations and, maybe we said a prayer before and go, okay, like that's good. But, stuff, but where do you go from there, right?
Right. Yeah, and it can be tricky. Mm-hmm. And I do always make sure that I make it very known, like if you don't want to stay, I'm going to do this now. And yes, we throw out and there's going to be play, or sometimes I'll just start getting whatever the activity is out, and then I will still make an announcement. That's okay, but I'll put out markers and I'll put out whatever, litmus test paper or whatever to get started, so that people start to see. And there are folks who have, we've chatted back and forth many times who come for dinner every week and they're like, I just can't do it. And I'm like, okay, right. That's okay. That's fine. And then there are people that'll come for dinner 6 or 8 times and then they'll be like, well, maybe I'll stay.
Right. This one looks interesting.
And then we start to, which is great. And I'm always like, hey, if you have other things you want to talk about that you don't feel comfortable talking in this group, you can always come talk to me any other time. Just let me know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, later on this afternoon, when you're high on acid, please come back.
Please come visit.
Now you know it's a place you can come.
It's true. And we'll get you some coffee and a snack and a nap.
There you go. There you go. Safe place. So, all right. So the last thing I kind of asked you to maybe share about a little bit is like, is there, we start all of our church council meetings here with God sightings. Like, where in the last month have you seen God work in the life of this place? And I think it's important to recognize that that's what we're about. We're providing space and opportunity, but the Holy Spirit's the one, you hope that is the one moving and doing work and, multiplying our efforts in this way that we can't expect sometimes. So do you have like an inspiring or just like one of those kind of moments where you're just like, oh, okay, that was something showed up bigger than us?
Yeah. So let's see, maybe 3 weeks ago, whatever the last week was before May started. Yeah. When we're not in semester anymore, all the days are the same.
Right.
But I get an email followed immediately by a text message, followed immediately by a phone call. So if you go on our website, for better or for worse, my personal cell phone information is all out there, because students never need you between 9 and 5. They're fine from 9 to 5. They need you all the other times.
Right. Early in the morning, late at night.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know, 7:30 in the morning. So usually you don't get an email, a text, and a phone call within seconds if something's not really, really wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, I'll read the email first. That'll probably have the most. So I read the email, look at the text that says, I send you an email. Thanks. And the email's from someone I've never met that says, Reverend Murphy. And I'm automatically like, this is weird. And I'm a student at CU. Can I come talk to you? No additional information. So the text was just, I sent you an email, and the phone call was, here's my name. Can I come talk to you? Okay, fine. So I
mysterious.
Right. So I text back and I said, yeah, absolutely. Pick a time. I had sent a few times, pick a time, and I'll meet you at Wesley. So we pick a time. I meet them at Wesley. Student comes in and immediately walks in my office and just bursts into tears.
No.
I'm like, oh no. And so within the first few minutes, we established that the student is Christian, but of a different faith tradition than United Methodism, and a freshman, and has just found out that none of their funding for next year is available. None. Not their Pell Grants, not their university scholarships, nothing. $0.
Oh, man.
And the deadline to apply, not to register for classes
Right.
for the fall, is like 4 days out. And you have to have put down your deposit for next year to be able to register for classes as a continuing student. So absolutely devastated.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't have any, if you're here for money, I'm going to just be really upfront with you and tell you I don't have any money.
Right.
And they said, no, I'm here because I can't possibly fathom how God is real if this is how things are going. And I was like, wow.
Okay.
And they said, so they're Catholic. I've been to confession 3 times now today. I don't feel any better. And I was like, do you think that, and they said, well, I must have done something wrong to make this happen. Whew, that's a lot to carry.
Yeah.
That's a lot to carry. And they said, what's worse is the semester's going to be over and I have to go home and tell my parents that I can't pay to go back to school. So it's this ongoing, like every couple of seconds, like the situation becomes more dire. I'm sitting there going, okay. She goes, so I looked on the CU website at all the different faith communities that CU has, and yours was the only one that had a picture of you and you looked nice. So I came and I was like, okay.
All right.
Glad I looked nice.
Yeah.
And so we went on to talk I was supposed to go to a meeting with our finance chair.
Mm-hmm.
And I was an hour and a half late
Mm-hmm.
because this girl, she just talked and talked and talked and talked. And cried, and we prayed, and she talked. And at the end she goes, I don't think God had anything to do with me losing my funding. I think that's just unfortunate. I was like, I think it probably is just unfortunate. And we talked about different places we could get funding, and it happened to be before the deadline for United Methodist scholarships. I'm like, you're not a Methodist student, but you could try. And she goes, no, I don't think God sent these hardships to me for me to come and find you. But I do think that I was supposed to come and find you. And I was supposed to come and find a different way of thinking about God. And I was like, you're right. I don't think that God made your grants go away so that you could come and find us.
Right.
But I do think you were supposed to come and find us.
Yeah.
And it was just so random. And, she came with us to Dave & Buster's. She's now, I was like, feel free to come back. And we've chatted a few times, and we're working on funding for the fall.
Okay.
But to take someone from this place of God did this to me because I did something wrong, to this bad thing happened, but also I was supposed to do this amazing thing that was going to help propel me forward in my faith, was such a God moment. And to have this complete stranger find me on the internet because I looked nice.
Well, you do.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But it was so funny to be like, that's how you picked to be here?
Yeah,
How random, right? Yeah. You could have gone to so many different places to ask for help.
Right. And probably would have heard all sorts of different things.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, but that's really interesting because I think that's the time of life that, this group, youth and young adult, you're moving out of that sort of like black and white, I mean, I feel like we've been picking on it a little bit, but like that Sunday school faith where it's just like, good, bad, God's mad at me, God's, whatever, to this whole like, no, sometimes things we don't want happen.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean, that, God's up there like putting his thumb on the scale or whatever, trying to mess with us or anything. It's just like, no, we live in a world where things happen sometimes, right, that are out of our control. And, but that's a kind of a way, it's shades of gray kind of thinking that, that you if you want to be a functional adult, you've got to be able to move into.
Exactly.
Right. And they're at that time of transition.
It's so funny.
And I think when we neglect that age group in the church, when people are making that, when young adults are making that transition, they will go find answers somewhere else.
Yes.
And then we act surprised that these good kids, who went to church all growing up, become adults and they don't go anymore. And I'm like, well, where were we to help guide them through this incredibly, probably one of the most important transitions you'll make in your life is that transition really out of childhood into adulthood, and thinking in different ways. Like, were we there to guide them? Were we there to help them understand? Were we there with, more than just simplistic, understandings around this and to help them develop a sophisticated faith, you know? And if we weren't, then they still have the questions.
That's right.
And so for that young person, I mean, just the answer could have easily been like, okay, there's just no God.
Right.
And now I'm just going to, and just get them on that path. And gosh, goodness knows it happens.
It does. It does. It's so funny. I have an 8-year-old and an almost 13-year-old. I'm not prepared.
You're never prepared.
Right. And to see the difference in where each of them is. My daughter was confirmed, and we spent a lot of time talking about confirmation is not graduation. You are not graduating from church. You're not done with faith.
It's good. It's good. Yeah, because sometimes it can feel that way, right?
Confirmation is not graduation. But to see the difference in even 13-year-old faith and 18-year-old faith.
Yeah.
And to see, do we ask a lot of questions as a youth? Yeah, sure. It's different, right? When you go out in the world on your own and you're presented with every possible opportunity, one, the safe space becomes really critical. But
right.
Two, being able to ask hard questions and then not be left to try to figure out the answer completely alone. Right. And I think that's something I remember growing up. When I went to college, I'll be completely honest with you and tell you I didn't go to church.
Yeah, me either.
I had no thank you. No. I had done that in my mind sufficiently, and I would do that again when I had children because they would need to go. And it wasn't until my junior year in college that kind of changed for me. But that said, I don't know where, I don't ever remember anyone ever saying to me, like, come to church with me, or right. This church has something for you, or hey, there's this young adult group that's run through the church that has a very low barrier of entry that it didn't exist.
Right.
So I didn't go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a big deal. And I think making sure we continue to invest and have these opportunities. So is important. And that's honestly one of the reasons that, Boulder Spirit exists. Is one of the reasons that, Wesley House CU exists is to make sure we're there. And there's no end of work to be done, right? No end of kids that need it. So, well, Ashley, I really do appreciate this. If folks want to know more about the ministry at Wesley, is there a website or where should they go?
Our website is Wesley and then the letter F. I didn't pick it. WesleyF.org. And then we also are on all the social media, including TikTok. Even though I don't really know what I'm doing, but we're trying. We're trying. We're trying to be cool.
Yeah.
And there's information there. We also are always open at 1290 Folsom Street in Boulder.
There you go. Yeah. Except during football games, unless you want to pay a lot of money.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
Thanks, Coach Brian.
Yeah. Well, Ashley, I do appreciate it. Do appreciate you coming out to talk to us, and I appreciate everybody out there tuning in and listening. Our plan is to bring these to you regularly as we find and encounter people with good stories to tell, like Ashley did for us today. And the big thing you can do is, like, subscribe, share with your friends, all those things that everybody asks you to do on all of the content they make today. So at this point, you know what to do. So, all right. Well, thank you, Ashley. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, have a great day.
You too.
And you all as well.